Washington drops its sanctions on Francesca Albanese, but not without a fight. The Trump administration has now filed an emergency appeal, hoping to put the UN Special Rapporteur for occupied Palestine back on its blacklist. I'll speak to the rapporteur one-on-one about the powerful efforts to silence her. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Francesca Albanese. Well, it seemed like a victory for free speech and the defense of Palestinians. Last week, a U.S. court overturned sanctions that punished Francesca Albanese for criticizing Israeli military action and for pressing the International Criminal Court to pursue those suspected of war crimes in Gaza. She also authored a report accusing major global corporations of participating in a genocide economy. Needless to say, she's made some very powerful enemies. But at least one U.S. court confirmed the law is on her side. So for now, she's been taken off a U.S. blacklist that's often used for terrorism suspects. But if the Trump administration gets its way, Francesca Albanese could be persona non grata again. Here's a look now at her story.
Francesca Albanese was never supposed to become this visible. For most UN officials, the language of international law rarely travels beyond conference rooms and diplomatic statements. But as Gaza was reduced to rubble, Albanese emerged as one of the few officials willing to describe what she says the world is witnessing: genocide. This week, a US federal court forced the Trump administration to temporarily lift sanctions imposed on the Italian human rights lawyer. Hours later, Washington moved to restore the sanctions through an emergency legal appeal. The White House says Albanese abused her role. Her supporters say she has been punished for refusing to stay silent about Gaza.
This genocide has become profitable, unfortunately, not just for some corrupt private entities. And this is not only Israel's crimes, this is a world's crime sustained by silence, complicity, and the supply of funds, weapons, and political cover. History will remember, because it's not that this is the first genocide that is been known. No, the Holocaust, the genocide in Bosnia, the genocide in Rwanda were also known to the people of the time. But this genocide happened because the world didn't care enough to stop them.
The sanctions came after Albanese urged the International Criminal Court to pursue war crime cases against Israeli officials and accused major Western corporations of profiting from occupation and war.
The United States is imposing sanctions on UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese for her abuse of her role. And in recent weeks, she also targeted U.S. companies in an unacceptable campaign of political and economic warfare.
The measures went far beyond diplomacy. According to court filings, Albanese lost access to banking systems connected to the United States. Her family says property was frozen. Threats followed. According to a Guardian interview published in April, one anonymous caller allegedly threatened Albanese's daughter and referenced the school she attends in Tunis. In the same interview, Albanese admitted there were moments she questioned whether continuing was worth the danger facing her family. To understand why she did continue, it helps to go back decades to southern Italy in the years of mafia violence and political corruption. Albanese grew up watching anti-mafia judge Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino transform international symbols after their assassinations in 1992. She has described being shaped by a world where power often operates through fear, silence, and patronage. That language of moral confrontation still defines her politics today. It also runs through her new book, When the World Sleeps, part memoir and part testimony. The book tells the story of Palestine through lives shaped by occupation and displacement. For supporters, the book speaks with the certainty of someone who believes neutrality in the face of mass suffering becomes a form of complicity. That same certainty is also why critics accuse her of crossing the line from investigator into activist. She has been condemned by Israeli and US officials and accused by opponents of politicizing international law. Yet the backlash appears to have only expanded her visibility.
Israel has effectively been given a license to torture Palestinians because most of your government, your ministers have allowed it. It is thanks to the courage of torture survivors and the Palestinians and Israeli NGOs who helped document their inferno if the truth has today reached this room.
Francesca Albanese insists fear will not silence her. But for many watching this unfold, the question is no longer just about Francesca Albanese. It's about what happens when the language of international law collides with the political reality of Gaza, and whether the cost of speaking about Palestinian suffering is now becoming part of the story itself.
And Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, joins me now from Tunis. Thank you so much for being with us. You were able to breathe a sigh of relief for what felt like a few minutes before the Trump administration basically said, nope, we want this ruling overturned. Why is there such determination to punish you for your speaking out?
It's because of the speaking out, because I've been subjected to unprecedented for a UN official, for a UN person. I've been subjected to unprecedented attacks, smears, vilification, threats, and silencing. And despite the violence of all this and impact, the psychological and professional impact of all this, I keep on speaking. And this is something that the very toxic political environment that I'm confronting doesn't tolerate. It really looks like patriarchy at its worst. So the judge has spoken. This is the beauty of constitutional democracies. We have the judiciary who has spoken. I mean, for us, it was very costly, very risky to trust the US justice system. And we did, because I'm someone who's deeply convinced that all the tools, all the remedies have to be tried before giving up.
Yeah.
And in any case, I don't even know what giving up would mean to me. So, yeah, as I said,
do you think
it's a mid-side of me.
Yeah. Do you think this appeal that they've launched will succeed, or do you still have faith in the U.S. justice system and the independence of its judges?
I do, which doesn't mean that I do trust it. This is the thing. I do trust the justice system, and I've been asked various times, but don't you think that this is a highly contentious and highly political case? This is not the first time that a U.S. judge is faced with a politically charged case. But the thing is that the fact it's so obvious. We are talking not of international law here, or not only about international law. We are talking of US law. The First Amendment is about freedom of speech. It's the First Amendment. It's the most important thing in the US normative establishment. And the judge has said she's been punished for speaking, so it's unlawful. And of course, the U.S. administration appeals, because it comes at no cost to them. It's not like us. I mean, they don't even pay their lawyers. It's probably paid with the U.S. No, probably it's paid with the U.S.
Taxpayer money.
Taxpayers.
Yeah.
And so.
Go ahead.
Eventually, nothing to lose other than making my life and the life of those around me miserable. It's such a persecution with no ends in sight. But on the one hand, me and my family have no alternative than trying to protect ourselves. It's not that I'm enjoying. I'm not enjoying at all. I mean, it gives me anxiety. It doesn't, and at the same time, I have nothing else than the law on my side. So, in a way, I empathize with the many. I wouldn't say with the Palestinians because I wouldn't dare comparing what I'm going through with what the Palestinians go through. But just imagine this is just a microscope, a microdose of the poison, of the venom that is unleashed against the Palestinians. And again, I empathize with those who seek justice, who desperately seek
Right.
justice and find a wall in front
Francesca,
of them.
just honestly, trying to imagine that anxiety you're speaking of actually gives me anxiety. I really have to respect how much you've been through and the fact that you keep pushing forward. But you've said before, and I'm quoting you, you said, "We are frail and we are weak, but only if we are isolated." So, speaking of anxiety, I mean, don't you feel isolated as well? You admit yourself, the international community, via the United Nations, did not come to your defense the way it should have.
Yeah, but we need to unpack. We need to unpack this paralysis. It's not, look, the system resents an incredible inequality that is built into itself. We have somewhat got used to believe that we live in a system that internationally is made of equal. There are UN organizations, and like there are General Assembly and the Security Council, and they need to take care of global peace. But eventually, not all members of the General Assembly, and surely not all members of the Security Council, are the same. And in fact, now we see the extra power, the hyperweight that the US is able to exercise. And it has always been like that. However, now led by an unscrupulous elite, which to the strongest forces of neoliberalism. So it's such an historical conjuncture, and they have set a very clear political agenda that, for what I'm concerned, impacts heavily the life of the Palestinians, whose human rights situation I'm responsible to monitor and report to the United Nations. So you see, it's like a circle. The United Nations know as an organization that what I'm doing is what I'm mandated to do. And at the same time, no one has the guts to confront the bully in the room, which is the US administration. And that was left with no alternative. And eventually, how incredible that a 13-year-old girl who just happens to be a US citizen, who's also US educated because she has been going to an American school for most of her life, she's to defend her mom. So they say, look, power is not where we believe, only where we believe it to be. It's everywhere there is someone courageous enough to use it. And today, my daughter and my husband are using all the power they have. I wouldn't say that we are isolated because we have the solidarity of so many, including so many countries. We tend to look at the so-called global north or industrialized countries, and it's true. I've not enjoyed much solidarity from Western countries. But what about the global south? Countries like Brazil and Colombia and
South
Namibia
Africa.
and South Africa, or Spain in Europe, or Slovenia, have stood by me and with me and again. So it's a world that is finding a new balance. This one is untenable. It's unsustainable.
Right. It's by putting you under this pressure. They want to destabilize your life, and they want to destabilize your family's life, really, to the point that you give in to the anxiety you talk about, and then you give up on what you're doing. Do you fear you could reach that point? We're all human.
I don't know. So far, it has not worked. And actually, you know what? The thing is that I am in greater harmony than I've ever been with myself and with my life. I know what I can lose. And again, there is no going back. But there is nothing as soft as a clear conscience as a pillow to sleep on. So, you know, I'm fine. I know that my life has become a battlefield,
Yeah.
but no more than others, no more than those US citizens who have to work 3 jobs to make it meet ends meet at the end of the month. Life is so difficult, life is so precarious for so many, including in my own country. This is why I tell everyone, look, be careful, because there is a direct link between the misery that many ordinary citizens are forced to live in and what's happening in Palestine. Palestine has unveiled the inequality and really the edges of what I call the necro-capitalism, an economic model that strangles lives and actually profits from destruction of life, from destruction of the environment, from destruction of resources that belong to everyone. And Palestine today is a moral compass, is a moral paradigm, and tells us, it has put us in front of a mirror. Today we see who we are as organizations, as individuals, as states, and the stance we take defines who we are. So I think it's I'm not sure I will succeed, I'm not sure we will succeed, but there is no other way than trying to strive for justice.
Yeah, there's no other way, and people ask you, I'm sure, constantly, if it's worth it. So I want to ask if you've ever had one of those, you know, emotional moments where someone on the ground in Palestine has said to you, thank you for speaking for us. Please keep doing what you're doing. You're really the only hope we might have.
It doesn't only happen with people from Palestine, to whom I say, la shukran ala wajib. You should, I mean, if there is someone who shouldn't thank me in this world, are the Palestinians. I feel so sorry and really so ashamed that after 2 years and a half of complete hypervisibility of their genocide, we are still there fighting to make sure that there is an end of an accountability for genocide. But yes, there are so many people everywhere in Europe, in all continents where I've been, in Australia, in African countries, wherever, there is solidarity and gratitude without borders. So no, I mean, I feel
must keep you going.
Again, I tell people, guys, I'm not exceptional. This fire is inside every one of us, and I know, because I didn't know I had it until I'm not sure. I mean, I was not born yesterday. For 45 years of my life, I've been quite quiet. In the sense, yes, I've always had strong sense of integrity and rigor in the disciplines, in research, in my work and in my professional life, in my work environment, in my family, with my friends, but that was it. Now the integrity has been tested.
Right.
And I think but this doesn't make a hero of me. I'm just a decent person. And this is really
you're
important.
A decent person that does the right
modesty.
thing. Yeah.
I believe
You've noted
everyone can
on
do that. Everyone must.
Well, they should, but many don't. And you've noted on numerous occasions, as we discussed, that you were disappointed in kind of the majority of the international community, or the global north in part, you know, in most part, for, you know, not standing up in your defense. Do you try to, you know, reassure the people that do come to your defense at whatever risk that the real reward is that they'll be on the right side of history? Do you think people overlook that all too often, that there's a longer-term picture here that will be reflected on in detail?
Look, eventually, no, I don't think that we need to do that because of that. I don't know if we will, if history will be written in a way to acknowledge this struggle for justice, because, you know, eventually history is written by those who win, And I'm not sure who will win this one. We are still in the fight. It's a fight. It's really a fight between two systems, like between dark and lightness, sort of. When this is how I explain it to my children. And of course, you need to have faith.
Yeah.
And there are people who have faith in God. They have faith in justice. There is an Italian, a very famous Italian jurist who used to say, justice is like the divinity. Those who see it, those who see it cannot but following it and veneer it. So this is how I feel. And for me, justice is a call that it's always speaking to me. So I cannot do anything else but this. And I think that everyone should do the same, not because of pride or because of, but because if we don't do that, the future will be much worse of this for all of us, or the absolute total majority of us, those who do not control large capitals, weapons,
Right.
or are part of the big tech and the heads of the big tech, they will have nothing to gain from this.
If we consider the future then, because of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, we're hearing endless talk now of a new world order emerging. How much would you welcome that new world order, and how would you want to see it take shape?
I see the future made of a decolonized multilateralism. This is where my power of imagination goes. Edward Said used to say that we need to imagine the future we want in order to get there. And this is what Palestinians have always had, and they continue to have that. It's not, again, it's something profoundly spiritual and not religious. But I find this spirituality in all indigenous people. And there is a misconception about what indigenous people are. But in recent years, I was also brought to areas in my own country, for example, that have become sacrificial areas, sacrificial zones, as the Agamben, the Italian philosopher, calls it, places where, because of the capitalist system, have been devastated by factories polluting, and now entire communities, thousands and thousands of people, or hundreds of thousands of people, depend on the factories that pollute their life, that bring cancers into their families, because there is nothing else. And in the future, I have in mind there are people who do not have to choose between life and death determined on the conditions of work. And there is decolonized multilateralism means that there are all states and, in fact, all nations represented at the international level, regardless of the initial wealth, especially considering, what is wealth? Look at Congo. It's the richest country in the world, and this country has not had one day of peace since colonial Belgium arrived there. So we need to rebalance things. We need to know history, and we need to build a present that allows a more equal and fair, just future. So there are other values that needs to get into this.
Learning
this
from
vision
history
for the future, not just.
Learning from history seems to be a tough ask at this point somehow. But Francesca Albanese, I have to say, after so many years of reporting on the UN and talking to its numerous employees, two people have really stood out to me for taking a risk in standing up for what they believe. Both work on Palestine. So there's Chris Gunnis, former spokesperson for UNRWA, and you. Why do you think just the two of you have really stood out to me? What is it that makes you and Chris, for example, as vocal as you are, while others try to be more diplomatic, which is part of their job? You've taken that extra step.
I've taken that extra step because I'm the special rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory. Actually, as a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever said it publicly, but Chris Garnis is the reason why I left OHCHR and I decided to go and work for UNRWA. Because I was so inspired, I wanted to be a human rights lawyer for the United Nations all my life, and because I thought that the United Nations would be the place where from where to assure protection. I mean, it was so naive, but at the same time, not naive, idealist, and I still have that. And then I see Chris Garnis speaking for an agency that was barely known to the largest public, UNRWA. And I said, I want to work with this guy. And I learned he was the spokesperson of UNRWA. I learned about UNRWA, and then I knew I wanted to work. Of course, I had studied Palestinian refugees, but I knew marginally the agency. Now I know and understand it much better, and it's fascinating. But so this is why Chris has inspired me. So the thing is that no, there are other people. I also think that Craig Mohaiber has been an incredibly strong voice. Others are perhaps, no, there is also, there are a few others. But of course, my voice stands out also because of the role I play. What scares me of the United Nations is not those who are only silent, because they could be silent and work behind the scenes in discreet diplomacy to advance justice and accountability. No, what scares me is that people trying to save themselves and sacrifice the system with it. For example, those who deny the possibility, and there are the possibility to talk about genocide, but it's wrong. And I've heard the UN officials saying we cannot talk about genocide because it depends very much on what the courts decides. No, it's wrong. It's wrong because there is a convention on the prevention of the crime of genocide. How can you prevent a crime if you have to wait until the end of the trial? Especially with the lengthy times with the length that judicial proceedings at the international level might take. So I think that this is what I think is wrong. But at the same time, there are also so many. And I want to acknowledge there's so many UN staff. A minority for sure, but still, this is new. During the genocide in Rwanda or in Bosnia, where the UN played a very dirty role, let's not forget, in really lacking protection. I don't think that this is the case. UNRWA has been fighting and continues to fight to be there. UNICEF has had a strong voice, and there are United Nations staff for Gaza who keep on pushing, including to end complicity, because there is complicity of UN organizations. Where, for example, look at the peacekeeping missions. What kind of tools do they buy? Do they have connections with the Israeli military industry? These are things that have to be investigated. Or what are the connections between the United Nations and the big tech? So I will never. It's not lost to me that the week I was sanctioned, 2 weeks after I presented my Anatomy of a Genocide, my Economy of Genocide report, denouncing also the role of the big tech, the Secretary General of the United Nations, with all due respect, had a meeting with the big tech in Geneva. And this was the perfect opportunity to expose the role of the big tech. And instead, let's continue business as usual. So I do have my own criticism toward the organization. And at the same time, I will always defend the organization, because this is multilateralism needs the United Nations. But of course, the United Nations is to be something else. It is to return to be relevant, while today it's not, to the point that Trump has even concocted an alternative to the Security Council that clearly is not working because it makes no sense.
Right.
But still, the weakness of the United Nations these days has been quite sensational.
Just, I've got to ask one question as you speak of Gaza again, and ask what you thought when you saw the actions of the Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir toward the Sumud flotilla activists? Did you feel, I don't know, vindicated is the word? And what did you make of the response? Because finally it seems like, okay, this is what we're dealing with. Go ahead.
I told the members of the flotilla, look, I think that this time you are going to be punished in a way that has no precedent, and they will become more and more violent toward you, testing the boundaries of their impunity. So in fact, in the last month alone, they have been abducting citizens, foreign citizens in international waters, in the SAR, in the area controlled by the European Union, in the Mediterranean Sea, very far from Gaza. They've been kidnapping people from far away from Gaza. They've been seizing the boats carrying European flags, and there has been no reaction. So I fear that because also we need to have, as a human rights movement, we need to have a clear action of what needs to happen. And once that we have understood that governments can condemn at best under popular pressure, but now it's time to break the lines of complicity. And this requires preparation. I mean, of course, I was scared. And of course, what happens is that I got not vindicated, absolutely. I mean, I got sad confirmation that my worst feelings were true. And now it's time. It's really time to react. I'm glad. Look, I'm glad that there are people who are so courageous. I couldn't do what they do. I'm not that. This is the thing. I'm not that courageous. I have integrity, but not necessarily the courage these people have to put themselves on a boat and go and challenge Israel. It's very heavy. I mean, it gives me nightmares. The only thought of it, because also look. I mean, I've undertaken a 6-month investigation on torture. And I totally know what not just Ben-Gvir, what Israeli soldiers, what Israeli forces are capable of. And now I'm carrying out a report on the on the media, including the Israeli media, and I know the kind of lies and the kind of fabrications that they spread. There is something extremely sickening right now in the Israeli society, and I don't want to feel sorry about saying that. The fact that the world is ignorant, many in the world are ignorant about what Israel is, cannot be my problem. This is what I see, this is what I tell, and not because I'm courageous, but because it is to be told, because never again cannot be a tribal slogan. And the only way to activate the never again is to recognize fascism and to recognize apartheid and therefore react to it.
Francesca Albanese, very unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd really like to thank you sincerely so much for being with me on this edition of the Newsmakers. Greatly appreciate your time. And to our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.